Two goals for tonight. One is to make sure you know what FP5 is when you see it. You're going to get a public notice coming soon. I want you to make sure, my job is to make sure you know what it is and how it impacts you. What is the impact to FP5 on you here in Joshua Tree? I'm going to tell you a little bit about the district. As Kyle said, I want you to write down all your questions. If you can't write it down before we end, that's fine. We'll give you plenty of time. We're going to stay around here tonight until we get all the questions answered. And so, and then I'm going to show you how you can get your questions answered, even if you don't know what your questions are tonight, how you can get more information as this process moves forward. The County Fire District was formed in 2008. We were a collection of 43 separate board-governed districts. So Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree, 29 Palms, Needles, Havasu Landing, they were all separate fire districts. They all had their separate funding source. They were all governed the same way. They were what they call board governed. The Board of Supervisors acted as the fire board, but they were separate board governed districts. The problem with, from our perspective, and I wasn't here when we were reformed, but I certainly support the concept, is that the revenue collected in those areas had to be spent in those areas. And so any economy of scale you might get through combining everybody's money together and paying for one program or one manager or one fire chief, I like to put it this way. How many fire chiefs do you need to pay for? In the County Fire District, we serve 19,000 square miles and you have one fire chief. And smaller agencies that I work with in the valley and throughout the county, and for that matter throughout the state, each one of them has a fire chief. I'm the highest paid firefighter in the county, but I'm not the highest paid fire chief in the county, if that makes sense. I have 2 deputy chiefs. We run 60 stations in the County Fire District. There are cities down the hill that have 2 deputy chiefs for 5 fire stations. But you see what I'm talking about. Instead of every single district paying for a hazardous materials program, an expensive program, and the tools are expensive, and the training is expensive, or a tech rescue program, or a paramedic program, what we said is let's put everything together. Let's form one district. Let's take those 43 separate districts. Let's form one fire district, and then let's pool our revenue and let's let it spread as far as we possibly can. My goal, and really the emphasis that I've had since I've been the fire chief, is to make administration as lean as we can, and I do have some administration back here that probably don't like it, and then put as much money as we can to boots on the ground, to service in the communities that respond to 911 calls. That happened in 2008. We were formed into service zones at that time. So we had one district with 4 service zones. The best way to depict the service zones, and we're going to get to a map here in just a second, but we have the North Desert Service Zone, which goes from the Cajon Pass over here all the way up to Prim State Line through Baker and through Barstow. We also have the South Desert, and that comes, as you know, through Morongo Valley, starts right at the top of the grade there. We don't serve Morongo Valley. They're a separate fire district. But as soon as you get to the Yucca grade, it goes all the way out to Big River on the California side of Parker, and then through the Havasu Landing area, which is the California side of the Arizona Lake Havasu, and then up, as you see, into Needles. It goes through Wonder Valley. We have 29 Palms. Joshua Tree would be right in here somewhere, and we'll show you there, and then up it joins the North Desert up off of Oldham Springs. We have the Mountain Service Zone, goes from Crestline all the way over to Fawnskin, and then we have the Valley Service Zone, which goes from the San Antonio Heights upland area all the way out to Oak Glen. At the same time, we have these other service zones. We have 10 separate fire protection and paramedic service zones, and it's going to get a little bit confusing, so just if you have questions and I don't answer them, just make sure you tuck them away or jot them down. 10 different communities throughout the county said to the fire district, we want better service than we have now. We essentially don't have the service that we think we need. So they said, can we get better service? And we said, well, we would agree with you. You need better service and more service, but we don't have the revenue to do that. And they said, well, could we raise the revenue? Could we essentially assess ourselves so that we can have a better level of service? And we said, yeah. There were 10 different communities that did that. There were fire protection zone 1. In fact, let's come over here to this map. Fire protection zone 1, which is right up here in Red Mountain. They pay $192 a year for, on top of their property taxes. So again, we have the base layer, which is the property tax layer, and then we have the fire protection zone. We have fire protection zone 2, which is the Windy Acres area, which is the San Bernardino County side of Ridgecrest. We have fire protection zone 3, and fire protection zone 3 is better seen maybe over here. It's the El Mirage area. Fire protection zone 4, I think we talked about. That's the Wonder Valley area right out here. Fire protection zone 5, which the first one was in Helendale, but since then a number of communities, Upland, San Bernardino, Needles, they actually, and 29 Palms, they joined the FP5, or that Fire Protection Zone 5, which is what we're talking about tonight. When they joined the county fire district, they joined that service zone as well. And then we have Fire Protection Zone 6, which is out here at Havasu Landing and covers a portion of 95. And then we have paramedic service zones. We have 4 of them. We have 2 on the mountaintop, and we have in Highland and Yucaipa, the county areas of Highland and Yucaipa. Real quick, and it's important for you to know, the fire district is a separate legal entity from the county of San Bernardino. And the only confusing part about that is the Board of Supervisors acts as my fire board. So we're what they call board governed, but they have no legal responsibility to give money to the fire district. When I was formed, this district, the county fire district, was formed as a taxing authority. So I'm like the other things on your property taxes. I actually take a portion of your 1%. It's called ad valorem. Some of you might have heard about that. Your property was assessed at some point in time, and 1% of that assessment goes to districts. Some are lighting districts, some are landscape, some are sewer and water districts, some are school districts. I'm a fire district. A portion of that 1%, that ad valorem tax, a portion of that goes to me. It varies from 0% in the county all the way up. There's a city that just joined us that I have 100% of their ad valorem tax, and everywhere in between. But that's how I get my funding. So we're going to talk about how the county gives me money for services in areas that don't have enough money, that don't generate enough money. But I think I need to make it very clear. The county has no legal obligation to do that. They have been doing it, but there is no legal obligation to do that. This is a district boundary. I'm not going to spend too much time here. I would like to focus in more on the South Desert Service Zone again, though. Remember, I told you this underlying layer, this gray layer on both maps, that's the area I collect a portion of the 1%. Remember I told you I get ad valorem taxes? Everything on this map that is pink or gray, I get part of your tax revenue. I get part of that 1%, that ad valorem tax. And then in the pink areas here, I actually get an additional assessment that I told you about, one of those 10 assessment areas. And so in the South Desert, currently, Needles pays the FP5. They joined FP5, so I have a portion of their property taxes, and then I have FP5 revenue. It's $157.27, I think, this year. FP4, they pay $138 a year. I have to look at the exact amount. They're about $138. And then you have FP4, which is Wonder Valley, and then 29 Palms also is part of FP5, and that's the $157 a year. How do we get our funding? Well, the pie chart that we get our funding from is pretty big, and there's a lot of revenue sources, but there's 3 primary sources for the fire district. And by the way, you can get all this on our website, sbcfire.org. We have a more graphic description in our annual report every year, but we also have our budget that we post online on our website if you want to see more detail. We get property taxes and contract revenue. So I told you about the property taxes. Let me get back to here real fast. I actually do have some contracts. The county fire district serves areas through two methods, mostly through property taxes. In other words, you're structurally part of the district. We have the fire powers and we get tax revenue. But we also contract with some cities. And when we contract with cities, it means that they keep their fire powers and then they just negotiate a contract. And we negotiate a long-term contract. But they want to keep fire powers, and then they want to collect the property taxes, and then they want to pass them through to us. Well, this area right here is the area of Atalano, so it doesn't look like it's part of the district, but we serve Atalano. They just renewed a 10-year contract with the county fire district. Hesperia right here, they just ended a 10-year contract and decided to get out of the fire business altogether. They just said, you know what, there's no interest in us contracting. Let's just pass our fire powers through to you and we'll transfer property taxes. Very similar to the community of Joshua Tree does the exact same thing. The community just north of them, Victorville, said just the opposite. They just finished a 10-year contract and said, we want to get out of the fire district and we want to start our own fire department. So they're doing exactly the opposite. And then a very large contract down here in the valley, the city of Fontana just renewed a 20-year agreement with the county fire district after the first 10-year agreement, and they negotiate a cost to provide fire protection with the fire district. So after Victorville leaves, which will be April 1st of 2019, and Hesperia joins the district, they just finished the protest process, so we expect that the certificate of completion will happen soon. We'll have only two contracts left in the county fire district. We'll have Fontana on a 20-year, just renewed, and Atalano on a 10-year. So when I told you we get property taxes, we also get some contract revenue, and of course, as you can imagine, the Fontana contract is a large contract. Then we have these 10 separate service zones. They range anywhere from $9, as low as $9 in El Mirage, all the way up to $192 in where I told you Red Mountain up off of 395. 10 separate service zones. And then I told you that the county gives the fire district money. We have a contract with the county of San Bernardino. Remember I told you there's no legal obligation to give us any money? But they have given us money, and I think I need to make something very clear here. It's not that they don't want to give us money. It's that they don't have a legal obligation to give us money. And when I ask for money from the county, that's an annual request during my budget process with the county of San Bernardino. So I'm not guaranteed that revenue, but I asked for that revenue. This year it's up to $17.4 million. They essentially, with a contract with the county, they said, you know, Mark, there's areas, and Joshua Tree is going to be one of them. We'll talk about the money generated here in taxes. They say, you know what, we believe we ought to have one fire station with one fire engine 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So they entered into an agreement. They said, they started with that premise, and they said, how much do you bring in ad valorem taxes? So we go to the assessor's office. It's easy we kind of break it down by tax rate area, and we can tell exactly how much money we get. So we told them how much money we get, and they said, well, we want to pay for the difference. That's where the contract comes in. Essentially, it's a contract, it's an agreement between the county of San Bernardino and the fire district to pay for services in areas that don't have enough revenue to pay for those services themselves. It's probably a good time for me because we actually pulled the property taxes. So out of that 1%, we actually get 19.7%. It's interesting. Joshua Tree is an interesting place. Yucca Valley has 1% for the entire town, and actually the whole fire district. Because I don't know if you're aware, but the Mesa area of Yucca Valley is actually part of the county, but it used to be part of the Yucca Valley Fire District. But Joshua Tree is a little interesting. We actually have a group of different tax rate areas. And so in some areas we're way down at 10% of that. Remember that 1% that I get a part of? Some of the areas in Joshua Tree are 10%, and other areas are over 20%, but our average is 19.7%. So if we average how much we get out of the property tax share, it's 19.7%. That generates $157,000 to the fire district. So to put that into perspective, it costs $2.2 million to run the station. And that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. That means that, as most employers do, we negotiate a vacation leave package with our employees. And so when one of the captains at a Joshua Trees goes on vacation, we hire somebody else back to cover that so we don't close the station down. Or when the paramedic off the fire engine is sick that day, we cover that back. And so it's covered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Well, that's a big difference. There's a huge difference between what we generate here on property taxes and what the county ends up coming up with to make sure that we can keep the fire station open. The only exception that I take with the agreement that I have with the county, because I appreciate it and I think the communities that I serve are better off for it, is they call them enhancements. If we were here tonight, I wish I was here tonight to tell you we have 3 stations in town and how many stations do you need. But at the end of the day, I don't believe it's an enhanced level of service when we're talking about 1 fire station with 1 fire engine, with a paramedic on it, with 3 people total, 24/7, 365. So their point is that it's an enhancement for what they have to do, because the county really doesn't have to do anything for the communities that above and beyond the property taxes that they generate. The benefits of FP5. Well, that deficit I just told you about, that happens throughout the county. We have communities throughout the county that actually, the service that we provide there costs more money than the revenue they generate. That's a structural deficit, and I'm going to show you some real life numbers here from my last year's budget to illustrate it, but at the end of the day, that structural deficit happens throughout the county fire district. It also helps me establish a sustainable capital improvement and replacement fund. When we have to replace, I was just talking with somebody before the meeting, Station 42 up on the Mesa, I would consider it at the end of life. The Yucca Station downtown, we either need to spend a lot of money to make it better, or we need to build a new one. And typically we look at 40 to 60 years. It all depends on what climate it's in, as you can imagine, what kind of construction was used to build it. A lot of factors go into it. We start monitoring how much money we spend on it every year. But at the end of the day, we need to have some way to replace the station or to do major remodeling. I'm reminded by my property management division that we partner with at the County of San Bernardino in downtown, that for every 50-year station, you're going to go through 2 roofs and you're going to go through 2 HVAC systems. Just plan on it. But even if I planned on it, I don't have any revenue. I don't have any revenue mechanism to pay for it. Today, when I need to replace a station, in fact, that's been the issue in Yucca Valley, is nobody disagrees with the fact that we need to build a new station. We need a station that better houses the workforce that we have there, to include administration. We've been renting office space out of Airway for as long as I've been part of the district. And yet, it really comes down to money. The board, my fire board, the board of supervisors agrees with it. They know we need the money, but it just comes down to, we don't have the money to do that. Bless you. Reestablishes district reserves. We started when I came back to the county. I was hired in 1992 in the county of the fire district here. I was hired into CSA 56 in Wrightwood as one of those 43 separate districts. We were then, of course, brought in. Actually, we had a loose kind of JPA, or a loose management association called the agency. I don't know if you remember the San Bernardino County Fire Agency. But we still just kind of shared some resources up top. And then when we reformed in 2008, we became the county fire district. But the reserves for the district when I came back as a fire chief just now a little over 7 years ago were about 20 million. We worked our way up to about 40 million. But this year, if everything's spent the way we've plugged it in or programmed it into the budget, we'd be down about 5 million. And that's an unrestricted reserve. So my point is, not only do we have the structural deficit where I rely on the county general fund through a contract, I'm also using my own fund balance. I like to say using a credit card. And we all in our lives, maybe, I hope I'm not the only one, but in the lives of our family, we all kind of dip in every once in a while to our savings account, or we dip into our credit card, and we live off of it for a little bit. We hope not to do it for very long. I've been doing that for about the last 4 years. So when I delivered my budget this year to my fire board, I said, I won't be able to do it in the coming years. So we need to find some way forward that isn't me living on my credit card, and quite frankly, it isn't me living off of your contract as well. It established a more consistent tax rate throughout the district, and the current service zones that you see, the pink service zones up there, would change to FP5. So my intention isn't to stack service zones. So if you're part of FP3 right now, you're not going to be FP3 and FP5. Everything, all the pink on the map, actually all of the gray area on the map would turn pink, and it would be FP5. So I would have 4 service zones: North Desert, South Desert, Mountain, and Valley, and then I would have 4 FP5 zones: South Desert FP5, North Desert FP5, Mountain FP5, and Valley FP5. I don't want to over confuse it, but I won't. There's going to be one underlying layer of property taxes that I get, a portion of that 1%, and it's different throughout the county. And then what FP5 expansion would do is it would also assess every property owner the $157.
So it would be assessing both.
The property taxes you'll continue to pay, and then there will be a very similar to like the pink areas right now. There would be an additional assessment on top of the property taxes. Yes, ma'am. And it allows the district to maintain current service levels through the MOU with the county. Almost every group will say, so are you going to get any money from the county? Well, I do know that every year that I've been part of the fire district, we've received some revenue from the county to make us whole. And since I've been back for 7 years, that has increased. In fact, for as long as I can remember us getting money every year, that's gone up. I do know that I'm going to get to a point where, as much as the fire district or the fire board believes that they would like to give me money, they're just going to come to a point where I'm asking for so much they just can't do it. And so when I say it allows, it puts me in a position to be able to negotiate a reasonable contract with the county, because my position is, and my fire board, I don't know that my fire board disagrees with it. No matter how much I get in property taxes, and no matter how much I get even in a service zone revenue like FP5 on top of that, there's going to be areas of the county that with the property taxes and the FP5, we still don't generate enough revenue. Interestingly enough, Joshua Tree is one of them. As we look at how much revenue we're expected to generate off of FP5, or that extra 157, that's only an extra $433,000 a year. So we have 157,000 in property taxes, 433 in potential FP5 revenue, or that service zone revenue. That's a total of 590,000, and like I said, it's costing us about $2.2 million on average here in this community to provide fire protection. And so I expect that the county will have to. Now I'm going to show you some numbers here which show you that if we add all the money generated in the South Desert Service Zone, that I shouldn't be at a deficit anymore, and I'll show you that here. I have a very small deficit after that. These are numbers. Don't get too taken away here by these numbers, because I know there's a lot of numbers here. I just want you to focus in on a couple of them. Remember when I told you the county contracts with me for $17.4 million? That's this number right here. They don't just give it to me and say, hey, Mark, I hope you spend it in the right place. They come to places like Joshua Tree and said, tell me exactly how much I'm going to have to spend extra. Or in Fawnskin, or in Wrightwood. There's communities throughout the county that they pay me extra for. So in the South Desert Service Zone, they pay me an extra $2 million. I remember when I told you I'm using some fund balance and reserves right now, unrestricted reserves. I dipped into my reserves this year $11.9 million. Last year was close to $10 million, but the point is I'm living off of my reserves, or what we call fund balance, which is the money left over at the end of the year after your budget year. If I add both of these up, and you can see how it's broken down by service zone, including special operations and our administration, it comes to $29.3 million. If I was to expand FP5 across the entire gray area of the county and get rid of all the other pink boxes, but have one throughout the entire fire district, I would generate 26.9. You can see where they'd be generated. Here in the South Desert Service Zone, I'd generate an extra $6.8 million. So I would technically have about $2.2 million to go towards, as I told you, some capital improvement, some capital replacement, putting it back into my reserve fund like I should. And so but overall, if I take everything, the service zones and my special operations and administration costs, I'm still about almost $2.5 million, even with FP5 short. So when somebody said, is the county still gonna give you money? Well, I can tell you today, I'm still gonna need at least $2.5 million moving forward. If I can't get FP5, and there's a process in place now that essentially puts forward a protest process, which means simply that if enough people protest the proposal to expand FP5 countywide, it would go away. It would either go to a vote at 25% of the property owners, or if it's 50% plus one of the property owners in the county fire district, it would just go away. We don't need to go to a vote. And then I would have to go back to the drawing board and try to figure out how we make up the revenue. If we were to have to cut that, somebody said, well, you've already added $3 million here. Well, okay, so this is my last year's budget here. I'm just throwing in, I'm projecting that my budget, my requirements will go up probably another $3 million. I haven't had a year yet that gas has gone down, or supplies and services or employee costs have gone down. So if I just project another $3 million, I'm at $32.3 million. I told you that our average countywide, it goes anywhere from about 2 to about 2.4 million, depending on, again, how efficient the station is and where they are on the pay scale that the folks work. So if it's high people at the top of the pay scale, that it can actually make quite a bit of difference, as opposed to people at the bottom of the pay scale. It's about $2.2 million. And so if I were to have to cut services in the county to come up with any portion of this $32.3 million, you can see, and again, it wouldn't all be stations. I'd be cutting support staff and mechanics and service, warehouse personnel. The amount of people that it takes to support those stations, it would be an equivalent or a commensurate amount of support staff. But I would have to reduce services in the county fire district. Where I cut services, I haven't even gone there, and hopefully I don't have to go there. But the reality is, if this process to expand FP5 and collect that assessment over the entire district doesn't go through, I'll have to go back and make some hard decisions. I'm sure that those will be decisions made with staff and my fire board as well. Potential response time increases. There's nothing scientific about this. We have a station location staffing software program, pretty sophisticated, that allows me to remove a station off of a map, and then it'll recalculate response times to a certain area of the map. And so it's intuitive, right? If we remove the Joshua Tree station, or let's say we remove the 29 Palm station, well, somebody would have to come from somewhere else, right? So if you remove stations, it's going to increase response time. If it's somewhere like the Baker station, that's where you get things like, an hour and 13 minutes. It's going to take a long time because they're going to be coming from Needles or somewhere else. This is the process and timeline that we're in right now. On June 12th, I told you I presented to my fire board my budget this year. Specifically, when I presented my budget to the fire board on June 12th, I looked at it this way. I said, I'm looking for $17.4 million in a contract with you again this year. I am using reserve funds of about $11.9 million. And the way I see it, we have about next year. The nice thing to know is that we just went through this process, so this isn't a Hail Mary that says if I don't get this now, tomorrow I gotta close stations. I don't have to make this presentation again to my fire board until next June. But I don't need to wait till next June to tell you that I'm in trouble. I don't need to do that. I can tell you that there's a problem. And so that when I presented my budget, I said, we can do one of three things as we move forward, the way I saw it. One is you could just say, Mark, we want you to live within your means. We want you to take the amount of money generated within the fire district, and we want you to spend money kind of like we do in our own budget at home. We don't have anything extra, and you can't keep living off your credit card. And quite frankly, as much money as we'd love to continue to give you out of the general fund, that's at the mercy of the economy. Every year, and we know the economy is going to go down some point, and quite frankly, they don't tell me this, but I'm also well aware of the fact that I need 3 votes. And so I could have a political change on my board where they come in and say, if we don't have a legal obligation to fund you, then live within your means. So I know that 17 point, and it's not a long-term contract. I have a 20-year agreement with Fontana and a 10-year agreement with Atalanta. I've got a year-to-year agreement with the county. And I appreciate the support I get from the county, but it's not lost on me that they're not required to give it to me. So I said, you can ask me to live within my means, and it would just require some cuts. The second one is you can program money into a long-term commitment out of the general fund, and you can lock that in to my budget, and that would put me on a better footing. Or third, you could expand FP5 pursuant to Fire District Law. You could expand an existing service zone. Fire District Law is Health and Safety Code, California Health and Safety Code 13800. If you Google California Fire District Law, that'll come up. It's Health and Safety Code 13800. And one of the sections, when it talks about funding the district, it says that a district can expand an existing service zone to maintain or improve services. You have to do 2 things. You have to notice the property owners, and you have to hold a public hearing. And so when I presented that, my fire board on a split vote said, yes, Mark, please move forward. Chief, move forward on the expansion. We'll adopt the resolution. I asked 2 things when they adopted the resolution. I asked that you adopt a protest process, meaning this. Since the law only required a public hearing, I couldn't imagine any scenario in which I put an open microphone at the board chambers in San Bernardino on any one day, nor could I imagine it lasting any less than 2 days, the hearing. And then have everybody speak into the microphone and have my board be able to realistically gauge support or opposition throughout 19,000 square miles. So I said, let's adopt a protest process, a way that the people of the district can express their support or opposition to the process. The protest process that they adopted is exactly like the LAFCO process. So if you don't know what LAFCO is, it's the Local Agency Formation Commission. It's the commission of elected leaders throughout the county, a selection of elected leaders throughout the county, that form districts, grow districts, shrink districts, inform them, and abolish them in the first place. They have, when they form those districts, they have a protest process. So we simply adopted that protest process. It's one that's been tried and true. It's been used for many, many years. They adopted that protest process. And then I said, I'd like to get out into the community. So I only ask that you allow me as the fire chief to personally get out in front of every community that we have, either ones that you identify or ones that we identify. And I told you we identified about 30 throughout the county. We're about a little over halfway right now, so that I can go out and let everybody know. What I don't want it to do is I don't want you to be caught off guard. I don't want you to get something in the mail and wonder what FP5 is. I don't want this to sneak through. We hired a consultant to collect the mail and to tabulate the results for the protest process. I want to make sure you know that we're not handling them and put them in boxes. That's all being done transparently and as objectively as we possibly can. That's where we are right now. They did adopt that on June 12th when they adopted my budget. They did adopt the resolution to start the process to expand FP5 fire district wide. They also adopted the protest process, and they said, Mark, here's a list of communities that we would like you to get out to. Joshua Tree, of course, was one of the ones high on Supervisor Ramos's, or Fire Board Ramos, member of Fire Board Ramos's list. August and September is the community meetings that we're holding. September 14th, you're going to get a public notice. It's going to look very similar to this. It's going to have your APN number up here at the top, and everybody who's on title for the property will get one of these. So if you have 10 people on title, you're going to get 10 letters. It's going to have your APN number. It's going to have the county fire district return address at the top. And then who it's titled to. That's going to have the public notice as well as the protest process will be included within this. I'm going to show you some other ways that you can get that information here in just a second as well. October 16th, we're going to have a public hearing. On October 16th, the board is going to convene. We're going to have the protest process read to us by the consultant that we've hired, and then the board might take action on that day to pass a resolution to expand FP5 fire district-wide. That might happen on October 16th, but there will be a public hearing on October 16th. Somebody's asked, well, what about here in Joshua Tree up in the high desert? So both centers, we've checked with the clerk to make sure, both centers, the Joshua Tree and the High Desert Government Center, will be open for input and any comments that you have for that public hearing. Because I couldn't imagine you or us anticipating all the questions, we've done our best. On our website, sbcfire.org, we have a tab here at the bottom. You can get it to it from any tablet, smartphone, or laptop or desktop computer on the internet. It pulls up our link here, FP5. It's got everything you could imagine. Actually, people are imagining things, it seems like every meeting. So, but we have resolutions, we have the protest process, we have the boundaries, we have a link to anything that we think you might need. We have the dates. And then if it isn't on here, we have a mailbox that you can click that you can ask questions to that we'll get back to you on. I think it's Kyle or Steve that monitor that mailbox every day, and invariably something's coming in that we haven't thought of, and we're answering those questions as they come in. I think I can take a breath now. I think that's it. So. I don't think I have anything else. I think I want to go ahead and start answering some questions here. I know Kyle's collecting cards right now, or Steve. Thank you, Steve. We have, we bring a group of people with us. I think I should probably add, because somebody asks every meeting, so just in case it's in one of these cards, you know, if you need so much money, why do you have so many people standing around? Well, these are other duties as assigned. So I don't pay them extra for being here. They do their day job, then they come to a night meeting, and then they'll go back to work tomorrow morning. So I appreciate that. This is important enough to us in the district to make sure that I have the people here that you might have a question of that I don't have the answer to. As you can imagine, I'm the fire chief. That means that I don't work nearly as hard as anybody else or everybody else in the district. That's all that means. And the folks in the back are people that work a lot harder, compiled most of the information that we have on the slides here. And so I find that after each meeting, bless you, after every meeting we've had, your questions might be better answered by our finance or our support staff in the back as well. Here's one that says, will fire tax monies go to support county OES? No, it does not go to county OES. OES is a county program that we're funded separately for, that is managed by the county fire district, but it actually is a county program funded separately by the county. So when I told you, I don't want to confuse you, at the risk of confusing you. Remember when I told you that they pay me $17.4 million? They actually pay me a little bit more money than that. They pay me money for OES, is one of them, and then the ambulance areas that the county fire department has, we cover areas that actually don't make money. And so let me explain that. The way to make money in the ambulance business is to run about 3 calls an hour. Keep the units busy. The cost remains the same, you're just looking at revenue. In areas of the county that we provide ambulance service in are areas that we need an ambulance, but the call volume isn't there to pay for the ambulance. And so the county, because it's a county responsibility, comes back and says, we will pay you the amount of money that you need to run the ambulance that you don't collect in billing. That's the best way for me to explain it. The exclusive operating areas that are devised in the state, throughout the state, and it's through Health and Safety Code or EMS, the EMS Act. The intention was that in exchange for the profitable EMS areas, you would pay for the unprofitable EMS areas. That doesn't happen exactly that way here in San Bernardino County, but the county still provides funding for that. And so between OES and the ambulances, we get roughly about another $7 million on top of the $17.4 million. This is strictly for services in the fire stations throughout the county of San Bernardino. Is the FP5 fire TAC protest that may be submitted only count if it's from a property owner who live within FP5, not all of San Bernardino County? No, so if you live within the fire district, you will get a notice like this to the same address that you get your property taxes to, and it will only be for property owners. Now, the caveat is if you're in FP5 already, you're not going to get one of these. So if you're out here, if you're FP5 29 Palms, or you're FP, well, that's the only one out here. If you're FP5 Needles, potentially, somebody could be here, you're not going to get one of these because you're already in FP5. So FP5 will come to everybody else. Even if you're part of FP4 in Wonder Valley, you're going to get one of these. If you're part of FP6 in Havasu Landing, you're going to get one of these. And if you're in one of the gray areas that you're not currently in a service zone, you're going to get one of these. Am I making sense on that?
So it goes for all of San Bernardino County.
Fire district. Remember, there's areas on the map that are white that aren't served by the county fire district. If it's served by the county fire district as part of the district, not Adelano and not Fontana or Hesperia or Victorville.
So the 25% comes to all the people in the gray area.
That is correct. Yeah.
Excuse me. So the people in 29 Palms are going to be subjected to an additional increase?
No.
Then they won't get to say anything about it?
No, they will not. So they have FP5 now. That won't change.
No. The charge, the per parcel fee.
Yeah, that's FP5. So Fire Protection Service Zone 5 that has $157.27, yeah, that won't change. What we're doing is this proposal is to take like what is being assessed there in 29 Palms and expanding that everywhere else that doesn't pay it.
Okay.
Yeah, not to put an additional.
But everybody outside of the existing zone will be charged the 157, whatever.
27.
In addition to whatever they might already be paying in their property taxes for fire protection.
Yes, everybody pays 1% in property taxes, and depending on where that is in the county, I get part of that.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you.
Okay. Is the FP5, I just answered that. Proposition 26, how can you make this proposal since Prop 26 narrowed the scope of taxation without voter approval? Please explain. Fire district law allows the expansion of a service zone. The Health and Safety Code allows the expansion of a service zone to improve or maintain services. So we're doing it pursuant to fire district law. And we believe that that will stand up. Obviously, we went through a legal process with legal counsel. We believe that'll stand up if challenged in court. What is considered Joshua Tree for tax purposes? So probably the best way to, for tax purposes, you mean for FP5 purposes? Everybody, Joshua Tree and everybody else will get it. If you're looking at the tax rate areas for Joshua Tree, you guys got a map here. No, it's not even that. Remember when I told you it varies? Joshua Tree is one of the few places. Here's the map I have from the assessor's office. And I apologize for it being, but see the different colors on the map here? That's the Joshua Tree community. Each one of those different colors depicts a different tax rate area. So it's taxed at a different rate. Not from the 1%, everybody pays the 1%, but my share, the share I get is different in each one of those colored areas. So it's interesting because I actually went to a couple meetings when I said Joshua Tree was 10%. I get 10% of that 1% ad valorem. And I found out that that's only one of these colored areas. They came back to me today and said, hey, Chief, I just want you to know when you go to Joshua Tree, every one of those colored areas, they average anywhere from 10 up to like 26%. And they average, that's,
We're all county, right?
that-
Joshua Tree's all county, we're not.
that's a good question. All I know is that when the 1% was divvied up, whoever gets a portion of it, sewer, water, schools, it just differed everywhere. It just differed everywhere. And so that's,
I'm going to ask the question because I think whatever you say you're getting seems extremely low.
yeah.
That's why I asked the question.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And I don't know what else to say other than there are areas that are very, very low. And there are areas, quite frankly, that are very high as
Is
well.
that map available anywhere besides in your hand?
I would imagine we can make this available. It's from the assessor's office, so I just don't know. We'll work on trying to get it up on, Bob, would that, can we work on trying to maybe get this up onto a website or something somewhere, just for the Joshua Tree folks? Like I say, this is an anomaly. Most of the time I can say like Yucca Valley, it's 22%, and it's 22% for the whole district. Here, it's just nutty. So again, I don't know how else to say it, other than when I started asking, the more questions I asked about that, the more I was told by the assessor's office that they need to get back to me. So, yeah.
As far as the tax rate areas go, when you look at a map, if I were to try to take the entire county and demonstrate the tax rate areas on a map, of the thousands of colors that I have to choose from on a plotter to make a map that size of the whole county, there is not enough colors to demonstrate all of that. It is a very confusing map. You have to zoom all the way down onto it in order to see the areas. They do not line up at all. I've seen them cross town boundaries. I've seen them cross city boundaries. How the assessor's office figures that out, I am still trying to gather myself.
What's the pay scale of fire and EMS personnel? So the best way, you can look at our overall budget for salary and benefits, or you can actually look at the MOUs on the county. Over the last 10 years, there's been a lot of transparency, open government type of stuff, where you can see exactly what firefighters, you can see what I make, you can see what my deputy chiefs make, you can see what the firefighters make. That's all on our website. So you can look at the MOUs. I will tell you this though, because a lot of people come back and say, well, firefighters make too much. And I appreciate the fact that some of you don't believe that, and I'm with you. But let me just tell you this. The firefighters, and I work with HR to verify numbers that they present during negotiations. HR is human resources during negotiations. Our firefighters are in the bottom third in pay and benefits in the county of San Bernardino. So let me put this into perspective. The county of San Bernardino is 20,000 square miles. The county fire district serves 19,000 square miles. Almost the entire, about 1,000 square miles served by local government. Out of the 2.4 roughly million people that live in the county fire district provides service to 1.2 million, so about half the residents of the county. And I only say that because a firefighter that works here in Joshua Tree might end up tomorrow working up on Lake Arrowhead and having to operate the boat and the snowcat. Here they might have a heat-related emergency and have to rappel, or a rescue that they have to rappel off the rocks in Joshua Tree. So what I ask the firefighters to do here in this county is remarkable, and they meet the challenge. They meet the challenge for you each and every day. So as much as I understand we're an expensive business, fire rescue and EMS is expensive. My job is to make sure that the way I use the money you give me, it's your money, it's taxpayer money, is to make sure you hold me accountable to spend it well. And I would tell you that I don't believe we overpay our firefighters and paramedics in the county of San Bernardino. What's the average overtime personnel on average? I'm going to give you a little bit of insight into overtime. Right now, if I add up all of the costs that it takes for me to hire a firefighter and then give them benefits and the pension costs, and everybody knows pension costs are higher than they've ever been, I'm actually over 1.5. Does that make sense? So it's if the employee is 1.0, all the other costs are about another 60%. Well, I only pay them 50% extra to work overtime. In other words, above an hour that they work in their work week. So I pay them time and a half. If I were to hire the firefighter, I pay over 1.6. So it actually saves me money to pay overtime. But I also know that I'm working them a lot more than they want to work at times. And so I try to keep a certain number of overtime spots. It could be a benefit to them. I don't know, they're trading time for money. They're at the fire station 24 hours if they work extra. But it doesn't hurt the district. I'm not losing money when I pay somebody time and a half to come cover a shift. I hope that makes sense. So the amount of money I pay in overtime, it's more interesting to me and more concerning to me that I'm not working them more than I should be working them, but that I have people available to pick up extra shifts when I need to. If that's still important for you to know exactly how much overtime I pay, make sure you get together with me or somebody in the back afterwards, and I'll make sure you get that number. What's the actual cost per employee versus what revenue received from the county and taxes received? Did I answer that? I don't want to put anybody on the spot. I'm not sure exactly, other than the fact that out of my annual budget, about 65% of it is employee costs, and that's pretty much average when you look at any business or government agency throughout the county or throughout the state or really throughout government or the private industry. What's the annual cost for all three stations in Yucca Valley, Joshua Tree, and the Mesa? It's about $2.2 million per fire engine, and then for an ambulance, it's about another $900. Now we collect revenue, ambulance, medical insurance reimbursement to the tune of about $400,000, $300,000 to $400,000, depending on what kind of year it is. And so that the total cost for an ambulance is about $600,000. That's money. That's net loss for me. And then the fire engine to staff that fire engine in a fire station 24 hours a day, 7 days a week is about $2.2 million. Yes, ma'am.
You said that above that 11.2, you get some money for the ambulance service. Will you lose that if this goes into effect?
That's a negotiation with the county, so I hope that I don't lose that. My guess is that I will lose some of that. That's my guess. If we have a revenue mechanism available to the district that doesn't obligate the general fund, which they're not legally responsible for, then my guess is I would lose some of that. But that'll be negotiated, I'm sure.
Do you think 50%? Less? More? Have you taken a guess at that?
No, only because I'm going to present it in June to my budget, and then I don't even know, I think somebody tried to put one of my fire board members on the spot. He has to get 2 other votes, by the way. So even if it was important for him to get, the county fire district money, he's got to get 2 other people on the board that believe that way. And so to the extent that it would be important for him to continue to fund the district with some money, and it would be my proposal, at the end of the day, he couldn't make that promise either because he's got to get 2 other votes. It's got to be a majority vote of the board.
Doesn't sound good.
Yeah. It is what it is. I don't know what else to say other than I'm going to ask for it. I can tell you that. So next June I'm going to be asking for it. But yeah, why not salary versus hourly? Have the numbers been crunched to see the potential of the cost savings? Yeah. So there's actually a requirement. There's an FLSA requirement that requires me to pay people extra for the work they do when they're at a certain level of employment. And so when they get to exempt, which is basically above the fire station, we are salaried. So that's why I told you I don't pay extra for people over here because they're not overtime. They're not. They're essentially exempt employees like I am. So we are salaried. It just means that you work as long as it takes to get the job done. How much tax is used to pay for PERS per each employee? it's over 50% just in the retirement cost. It's not PERS, by the way. Again, not wanting to confuse you, it's PERS is the state employees retirement system. We are what they call SB SARA, which is a county employee retirement system. Very similar, run very similarly. I think it's run better than PERS is, but it's run by the county. It's a separate board, and I say the county, not the county of San Bernardino, but a separate board, a separate retirement board. What's the future of the Mesa station? That's a good question. We don't know, to be honest. I think I told you a little bit ago that when the Mesa station, the Yucca Mesa station, or the station up off of Aberdeen was put in there, that was when there was only service to the fire district. And so to the extent that now that we serve Joshua Tree, and that we don't have some volunteer coverage in some of the areas, my question is it still where it needs to be? And so if you went, any of you went to the Yucca Valley meeting, I said, we're going to have to sit down with the town of Yucca Valley. We're going to sit down with them and say, okay, looking at what the responsibility is for the county and what the desires and responsibility is to serve the town of Yucca Valley, where are we best stationed? We're at a pretty good spot right now because, quite frankly, we need new facilities. So there's probably no better time than now to look at that. My belief is, and we've done some computer modeling, my belief is that that station up there shouldn't be on Aberdeen and Avalon. It should be closer to 247, and it should be probably at least a little bit south on 247. And let me just a second. Let me just tell you how I got there. It wasn't that I feel that way. It's that I looked at the computer modeling, and what it does is it says if you take into account geography and you take call volume, it should be closer to 247 and further south. That's what the computer tells me. I just give it information. Now, there are some variables, and I was talking with somebody here before the meeting. There are variables. You weight the importance of geography and call volume. So if you put in 50-50, if you said call volume is every bit as important as geography, it says that both stations ought to be on the highway. If you put, I'm just telling you what it says on call volume and response time optimization. Now, if I was to say that geography is 75% of the importance, and I can put that into the computer, and 25% of it is call volume, it puts it. That's why I said it puts it further up 247, closer to Buena Vista. It's where it puts us. So my guess is, as we sit down, and I told the Yucca Valley group this, there's really no use even engaging in that at this point unless I can get some revenue. Because if I don't get revenue, those two stations are going to stay right where they are, and we're going to continue. We call it the Biltmore here in Yucca Valley, the guys that work there, the guys and gals that work there, because we just keep building onto it. We just, add something else to it. Or remodel it. And so I can't even have that conversation, but I did promise the town of Yucca Valley this, and I'll promise the community, especially here in Morongo Valley. We need to figure out where the right location is. We need to figure that out. We need to figure out, I believe that the station here in Joshua Tree is located in the right spot. So I'm not here to tell you that that's up for discussion. So I know I'm talking to the Joshua Tree group, but the other stations that we have, I don't think that they're located in the right position. But I can't tell you where they're located best, because that's going to be a community decision. That's going to be a discussion. Yes, ma'am.
So in 1970, when you built the fire station, that was a big mistake, huh?
No, it was never a mistake. When we built that fire station then, it was the Yucca Valley Fire District. And so to the extent that it was just responsible for the district and it wasn't responsible for anything outside the district, it was in the perfect spot. Now, when you take into account that it serves a much larger area and that there are other resources available to it, I'm telling you what the computer tells me is it's probably not in the best location.
You
And
have two schools, close to the fire station. You got kids at Landers, you got kids
Yes.
at Mesa, so
Yeah.
you got to kind of think about how much response time from town to get there.
Yes.
I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I think, as I look at it, I really do think moving that station is right. Where it moves to, again, if it just moves down Aberdeen closer to 247, If it moves down 247 closer to Buena Vista, I don't know. I can tell you though, if you were to just to do a computer analysis, and listen, I know that there's more to that. I know that there's target hazards out there, including the elementary school. When I did 18 months out here, I was at the 42 station, so I was stationed there. I'm very familiar with the Mesa and the needs on the Mesa. I'm also aware of the fact that the Mesa was down in Yucca Valley a lot, and it was out in Landers a lot. And so how can we, the fire district, continue to serve that area, the Mesa? Nobody's leaving the Mesa. Nobody's going to abandon the Mesa. How do we serve that area and make sure that we can serve everybody else? And I just don't know. In fact, I'm fairly certain as we look at the location of that station, it's not in the ideal location. But when it was Yucca Valley Fire District alone, I think it was in a good location. But
Folks, we want to get to all your questions, so we're going to finish with the cards, and then we'll be here all night to answer any questions you guys have.
All night?
if you want to be here all night. How much is spent on administrative support? Is your budget online? Yes, our budget's online. Our administrative support costs, I don't even want to hazard a guess on that, on what we spend on administrative support. I do know this. I do know that the money that comes into what we call the FPD fund, or the administrative fund, is actually, we spend more of it outside of administration than we spend it inside of administration. And so my goal, remember when I told you when I came back and we tried to make us as lean as we could up top, my goal has to been, and I think at the chagrin of some of my staff, is to run as lean as we can up top, because you don't really care how many people are down at Fifth Street in an office. You really want to know how many services are out seeing you on the street. Our budget is online. You can actually see detail on that. We need our fire station on the Mesa. I hear that loud and clear. Approximately 900 and growing Airbnb short-term rentals in Joshua Tree alone, plus hip camp, raw land, often remote and no water camping too. How are these remote owners, often vacant fire lighting properties factored into this new plan, and why aren't they paying taxes to help fund the occupancy, our police fire infrastructure, since they are burdening it? Just to the extent that this assessment will impact them as well. I mean, it will go right on top of those properties as well. So the property owners will be paying that moving forward if FP5 is ultimately expanded district-wide. But I understand that. In fact, especially here in Joshua Tree, I understand that's a real big issue. How old is Station 42? What needs to be done to it? Anybody know how old 42 is that's here? My guess is it's got to be all of 40 years.
I think early 70s.
Yeah, okay, yeah. And so we're just now looking at, it wasn't made with any bedrooms, it was actually made with like a dorm scenario. And so back when it was all guys and they sat around and belched and told stories, and I only say that because I was one of those guys. We actually were trying to attract women into the fire service because we believe that they're underrepresented. And yet I don't believe, nor does the county believe, that we ought to throw them into a big dorm with a bunch of guys. And so we are doing things to try to make more living spaces. And so I look at a place like 42 and the challenges we have with basically an all-gender bathroom and all-gender sleeping quarters and other things. We just need to fix it. And so we're looking at that facility specifically, and we're saying, do we invest a lot of money to fix that? Or do we look at whether or not it's even, do we spend $1 million? Do we spend $500,000 to do that when we could spend $4 million and build a new one, or $4.5 million? Those are the kind of things we're looking at right now. Is it true that you have plans to close the Yucca Mesa Fire Station? No plans. We are looking at whether or not it's best positioned in the place that it is right now. This is currently, it's based on the percentage of taxes. Why can't it be based that way for an increase? A flat rate is unfair to small homeowners and those on fixed incomes. I've heard that argument, and to the extent that it's a flat per parcel fee as opposed to a benefit assessment based on square footage or developed or undeveloped, that's the way FP5 was formed. I'm not here to tell you that there aren't other ways to do it. But to the extent that anybody who might own that piece of property might require those services because they're traveling the roads, or that there's any other activity on that property, they still have access, and in fact, we would serve them the exact same way whether they had a home on it or not. Can a method be developed to access ability to pay instead of a flat fee by the supervisors? I plan to vote for the assessment this time. So essentially the question is, can a method be developed to access ability to pay instead of a flat fee by the supervisors? Well, the way it's developed is it's going to come on your property tax bill. It's $157.27, so that will be split up twice on your property tax bill like your property taxes are, so it'll be 70 and some change on the first bill, and it'll be 70 and some change on the second bill. Will all property owners get a notice if you don't get your mail here? Wherever you get your property tax bill is where you're going to get your notice. And I don't know where that is, because most people that live out of the area actually get their property tax bill wherever they're living. So just keep that in mind. And we're literally just using the assessor's roll for that. Will FP5 go ahead if the 157 doesn't go through? So if, actually just the opposite, so the 157 won't go through if FP5 doesn't go ahead, if that makes sense. So if FP5, either 25% plus one, or for whatever reason the board decides to, based on the protests, not approve a resolution to expand FP5, then 157 will not be assessed to your property. Now that'll bring some other concerns, obviously bring up some other issues for the fire district, but it won't be the 157 per property. Please go over option 2. So the option 2 that I told you was to lock in money out of the general fund. When I told you that we could live within our means or we could get money out of the general fund, this board has shown a willingness to give money out of the general fund to the fire district, but they don't have a legal obligation to lock it in, and so I don't think we'll ever get a board that says, I don't have a legal obligation to do it, why would I lock it in? And in fact, I don't even want to throw the current board under the bus, because when we were reformed in 2008, LAFCO said that we had an $8 million deficit then, and asked the board to lock money into the out of the general fund, from the general fund into the fire district, and that board said, no, we don't have a legal obligation to do it. Let's take it year to year. Yes, ma'am.
Sir, I wrote those questions, but I was trying to get to some points to diversify the funding to help relieve some of the taxpayers' concerns. One would be, how about looking at a possible 1/4 to 0.5% sales tax increase, coupled with a reduction instead of 3% annual increase, go more like 1% because of COLA on the Social Security. Number 2, assess new builders a special assessment because of their increased usage. How about increasing your request for funds from medical insurance coverage for EMS services? Things like that, consider diversifying it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I don't remember the list, but I will tell you that there's no fewer than 5 ways that I know throughout the state. I've worked with the Fire Chiefs Association throughout the state, and what I know is some communities use utility user taxes to fund public safety, some use voter-approved special taxes, some use sales taxes, others use benefit assessments. I live in a community in San Bernardino County where I pay, on top of my property taxes, I pay about $228. Now, my neighbor, who's a little bit bigger in square footage, pays about $400. So, and that's based on square footage. So I know it's done differently in every area, and I'm certainly not here today or tonight to tell you that this is the only way to do it. I'm telling you this is a way to do it. And from the standpoint of diversifying revenue, I see that this is exactly that. I see property taxes as being my primary source of revenue, and this being something that is not dependent on property values. And so when we look at diversification, if I had to ask for a 3% increase, because as you know, there's up to a 3% increase every year, based on the budget that I present, on approval of the fire board every year, it's not automatic. As I look at that in years that I might have a drastic reduction in property tax, and I think it's just a matter of time, I don't think it's if, we're going to get a downturn in the economy, my property taxes will be affected to the extent that I could go to my fire board and say, I need 3% this year so that I can maintain as many services as I can and I can reduce the service cuts. I am diversifying. I believe that what we're doing is diversifying, and yet I also understand that there are many ways to skin a cat, and that this is just one of those ways.
What I meant by diversify is split the cost, in different areas. I'm a mother of a former firefighter who was in the military during 9/11, and I know the things that they go through in camps and being sent out to different locations in the country to fight fires. And they risk their lives, and they deserve to have good equipment and things. Also, I'm from a standpoint of understanding disabled veterans and seniors and the costs, limitations they encounter on a daily basis. You have families that have small children and a cap on their income, maybe minimum wage. And so that's why I was saying to spread the cost perhaps to a sales tax increase, a slight sales tax increase, a reduction in the annual increase you're asking in your budget, just a slight builder assessments, maybe seeking EMS services, compensations more on an increased level from medical insurances and other options.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you we're interested in all options. And so to the extent that we can increase our revenue somewhere else, we're interested. I'll tell you that's not what this process is about. This is about expanding FP5. I will tell you this, and I was asked this in the community of Wonder Valley and in the community of Lake Arrowhead. I'm trying to maintain the services I have. I do believe that children and seniors are the very most vulnerable amongst us. And in fact, they receive maybe even a higher percentage of our resources when it comes to needs for medical emergencies. My ability to maintain those services is dependent on an increase in revenue. It's that simple. And so when I balance the impact that this is going to have to seniors, especially fixed income throughout the county, I also take into consideration that I'm asking for it so I can keep one station open in this community 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Not 2 stations, not 5 stations. One station with 3 people with 1 paramedic. And my only point is, as I balance what I'm asking the fire board to do in expanding FP5, I'm balancing the very important service that I'm providing to those same people that I'm asking for the money from. And so I hear your frustration and I hear your concern. And I will tell you that we continue to look at ways to raise revenue and cut costs, not just raise revenue, but to cut costs. We do that every year. So, but I appreciate your input. Have you considered a slight sales tax increase? That was something we consider. We actually talked about that at the fire board meeting. And why 3% annual increase? It's up to 3%. So I've been the fire chief 7 years, and we haven't had a full 3%. 2 of the 7 budget years I've been there, we've had something less than 3%. So it's based on my budget presentation and approval by the fire board. Will any stations that have been closed be reopened? No. We're looking at maintaining the services that we have out of the stations we have open today. I can show you documents that my fire insurance increased 60% due to the Panorama Heights station closure. Why should homeowners pay more for less service? Why have your staffing expenses doubled since 2014-15? We haven't doubled in staffing expenses, but we have had increases. Our staffing expenses are primarily due to constant staffing, which means that we leave the fire station open even when people go off sick or go on vacation. And then they increase due to MOU increases. So that's our staffing increase. And I don't know what other question was on there that I didn't answer. Was that everything?
Yeah, we'll answer them separately too afterwards.
What cost-saving analysis and cuts have been examined before the proposal of FP5? Well, we go through a very exhaustive budget process. We have an annual external audit, and then we work with the county finance office to try to figure out, since they're such a big investor in the county fire district, they want to help us do our budget. And so to the extent that we can, and we haven't had a budget year yet where we haven't made cuts. Now, I say that because we've increased costs as well. Costs have increased at the same time. So, but we have made cuts. Whether it's overhead and administration, one of the major things we did in the county fire district is when I started, we had firefighters on ambulances. Well, firefighters are the very most expensive. They're the safety employees. What I said is, why don't we hire non-safety employees, in other words, non-firefighters, people that aren't running into burning buildings, and put them on the ambulances, and then keep the firefighters on the fire engines and the rescue squads. So that was a huge change in the way we do business here. I was actually a firefighter hired onto an ambulance. Today, we only hire county general employees onto the ambulances. That's the way we staff it. That was a huge, over time, a very large cost-saving measure, but that was a very significant cost-saving measure. Now, I say that because we didn't lay anybody off. So in the areas that we might have only had one person at a fire station, we added 2 people. And in a place we had 2 people, we tried to add 3 people. When it comes to having a fire engine in a community, let me just be very clear with you as a community within the district. If I don't have 3 people on the fire engine, I can't operate the fire engine. You have one person at the pump panel. They're the ones that make sure that the fire, or the water continues through the hose line, so whoever's at the end of it can reliably be assured that they have water. And then we have 2 people on the line because it weighs a lot, and you got to maneuver around when you're working it through a structure. So if you don't have at least 3 people, now, the county fire district, we only have 3 people on our fire engines up here in the desert. There are communities down the hill that have 4 people on a fire engine. And if you can afford 4 people, that's even better. That's even more effective if you have 4 people, because then you have 3 people on the line, or you have the captain who's directing. My point is simply this. We're doing everything we can to do things as efficiently and effectively as possible, but at the same time, I'm trying to provide an effective firefighting force to the communities I serve. And putting one person on any piece of equipment might look like the station's open and the door's open, but what work do they do? That's the analysis that I've done. Yes, ma'am.
Mine was the last question.
Yes.
And I'm looking at your staffing expenses in your budget right here.
Mm-hmm.
In the 2014-2015 year, it was $12,716,000 and change. And for the 2018-2019 recommended budget, it's $25,122,000 and change. So it has doubled. So you can't tell me it's not double because your paperwork tells me that it has.
Yeah,
Right here.
yeah,
That's one. Number 2 is, explain to me why I should pay you more, pay the county more, when I'm getting less service and I'm already having to pay 60% more for my homeowner's fire insurance because you closed the station. How does that make sense for me to pay more for less?
Well, here in Joshua Tree, I can only tell you that any service, the service that we can provide now is not based on the amount of revenue I generate from the area. It's based on money that I get from the county. If I were simply to live off of the revenue I generate within the county, we wouldn't have a fire station in the community.
But you're saying if we pay this extra tax, you're not going to open up the stations that you closed. So we're paying more for less.
So if you pay more, I can tell you we won't be faced with having to close the station. And I think I pointed that out on the numbers.
You already closed the Panorama Heights station.
Actually, when 29 Palms joined us, they closed the station. So they closed the station before they joined us. So no, we've maintained the stations that we've partnered with. The town of 29 Palms. That's.
My home insurance has gone up 60% because it's closed and you're not going to reopen it. You're not going to offer any more service there so that I won't have to be paying that amount more. So I'm paying them more and I'm paying you more and I'm not getting any more service. As a consumer, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I understand your concern, and other than the fact that we're trying to raise enough revenue to maintain the services we have both in 29 Palms, in Joshua Tree, and in Yucca Valley, I don't know what else to say other than that's my goal. My goal is to generate a revenue source that I can guarantee service. And to the extent that today I'm dependent on both my savings account and at a chunk of money annually from the general fund.
Yeah, that's Bernardino and Upland.
Oh, the increased costs in staffing costs were people that joined us. So we had, was it just in the South Desert?
Right, well, you said it didn't double, but it says right here in your budget that it did.
Yeah, and so I think during that time, both Needles and 29 Palms joined the county fire district.
This is your entire budget. It's doubled since 2014.
So then you throw in the city of Upland and the city of San Bernardino as well. We also had.
I did notice that the city of San Bernardino takes up an excessively large chunk of your budget.
Yeah, the city of San Bernardino roughly was about $32 million to provide service there. So we take, remember when I told you we get a portion of property taxes? I take all of their property taxes. So the city of San Bernardino transfers all of their property taxes to the county fire district. And on top of that, they pay FP5. So they, but the way that process worked is they said, I think we want to join you. And we said, great, let's talk. And they said, how much would it cost? We figured it out. Didn't give them any deals. We said it's going to cost $32 million, and they said, well, that's going to take all of our property taxes and FP5. And we said, if you want to join the district, and they were in a tough spot, we said that's what it would take. But if you look at countywide, the county fire district is almost twice as big as it was about 10 years ago. Mostly because, remember when I said we wanted to get together and achieve economy of scale, almost everybody that I know, and not just here, but in the state, are saying, how do I go to my neighbor and say, let's get together, pool our resources, see if we can do it better. So that was probably in response to that. I'm sorry about not being able to answer that immediately, but as Kyle showed, that was basically the collection of a lot of people that joined us over that time.
It kind of sounds like you're saying that unless you get this money, you're not going to be able to maintain the services.
No, ma'am. In fact, I said just the opposite. This isn't a Hail Mary today. My job is to get out to you very early on, give you a very similar presentation than what I gave the board of directors, our fire board, and say we have options. If the protest process generates 25% plus one, it's going to go to a vote. If 50% plus one protested, it just doesn't happen. And then I need to go back and try to figure out what I do. I don't know what that is. But I need to find revenue. But the options are obviously we have to close services, right? If I don't get revenue, I have to live within my means, and so, yeah. Yes,
Sir,
ma'am.
I have to leave, but I wanted to make a kind of a statement. I live in Landers. I happen to be right across the street from a fire hydrant, yes. But my fire tax has cost has gone up. I am living on less than $12,000 a year, and I'm being taxed to death. I'm going to get to the point where I won't be able to live out here anymore. And my house is only 24 feet by 28 feet. We're talking a garage. And I can't keep up with it. And I understand what you're saying. You need this, you need that, you need the other thing. But all of us out here, we just did a fundraiser to get supplies to our Landers school. You know, we're out doing all these charitable things to help people, and nobody's helping us. Yeah, no one wants to see your house burned down, but if it burned down, my insurance will cover it. I'm paying enough. So I just wanted to make that statement. I mean, you know, when you get into your 70s, you're looking at every single penny. And but I have to leave, and I thank you very much for coming out and talking to us.
Yeah, and I appreciate your perspective. I don't know what to say other than I know it means a lot to a lot of people, and so I don't know what to say about that. It's $157 more than what you're paying last year, and I haven't come to a community yet that said, you know, I have a lot of extra money laying around. Now I have a place to give it. So, and I only say that because I know that some people are living off of fixed incomes, and yet the option to me.
Maybe you should go to GoFundMe.
Yeah. Well, we
I'm really serious.
Yeah.
It might work. I
Yeah.
really think we should do a GoFundMe to pay our government.
Some government agencies use that. I think Morongo Valley did that for a fire engine, and I think they got a few $1,000s anyway, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just noticed the time and I know it's getting late, but we have a team that's been working on this to make sure that we answer all of your questions. And so we're gonna end the chief's session right now, but we are all gonna be here to answer your individual questions. So
But I want to ask one question,
sure.
because I want everybody to realize, because I don't know how many people have got the detail. My
think those are ones that I
concern
had
is
actually.
that you're not, this tax isn't being equally divided because of the parcels that are joining. You're allowing those people that have multiple parcels that touch one another, developers, people that have big homes, they buy up their neighbor's property, but whatever, those, why are you say this is fair and equal to give them the benefit of only paying 157 if they have 10 parcels, and the people that are poor, they're barely making ends meet, have to pay that, and they're the wealthier getting that tax break? I want you to address that.
Well, to the extent that we hear it on the other side too, so we hear people that say they own multiple properties, but they don't have anything built on them. Why are they paying money as opposed to people who have one property and have something on it and they're paying the exact same? So to the extent that they think it's unfair, I can only tell you, I think that the fairest way I can do it is to distribute it equally across every property in the county. I do know there's arguments on both sides though. There are people that have multiple properties. Some developers have contiguous properties, and they can file for a one-time, like you had mentioned, fee with the assessor to combine them just for tax purposes. You can do that, but most of those are undeveloped, and they come back and say, well, why would I be paying anything if it's undeveloped? And so I understand your concern, and believe me, I've heard from many people who say that I'd rather it be based on size of property or size of development or wealth of the owner. And to the extent that I don't have a way to do that, and specifically am asking for a flat parcel tax, I don't know how else to say it other than I've heard it both ways on unfairness.
What about a percentage of the assessed value?
Yeah, that's another way to do it. That's what they call a benefit assessment. That's my partner to the east or west LA County Fire does that. They have a whole benefit assessment division, and so they spend most of their time trying to figure out what benefit you're getting from it, and then they adjust your rate accordingly, and we decided not to do that.
Why? The assessor already has it, why would you have to reinvent the wheel?
Right.
Yeah, it's just, like I say, remember I told you there were 4 or 5 different ways you could do it? That's just not the way we chose to do it. So there's other ways that you could raise revenue. I'm not going to argue that, but that's not the way we're proposing in FP5.
Thank you, folks. All the team members are going to be here to answer your questions. Just you can ask your question to any one of us, and we'll be more than happy to answer it.